Africa Melane.
So the latest Money Stress Tracker survey painting a sobering picture of financial strain across the nation. According to the third annual survey released last year, staggering 53% of South Africans are dedicating more than 40% of their take-home pay to debt repayments. Despite this, 42% of respondents admit to struggling with their monthly debt repayments. Joining me on the line now is the Senior Program Manager at Old Mutual, Thabo Hollo. Thabo, very good morning and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Africa. Good morning.
Today, we're going to be talking about good debt versus bad debt and how I've always distinguished it. Good debt is debt for something that's going to make me money in the long run, and bad debt is something that I'm going to consume and excrete almost immediately after having incurred the debt. It's a very childish way of looking at it, but it makes sense, doesn't it?
It does make sense, absolutely, Africa. I wouldn't put it that way. I'll leave that up to you, but it absolutely makes sense. Look, yes, there's definitely a difference between good and bad debt, right? And for those that work in a financial services environment, they know that debt works out perfectly for us, right? And I suppose in general, if I may quote Miles Monroe, for instance, when he said, where purpose is unknown, abuse is eminent. That is the same. If we don't know the purpose of using a debt product or a credit product, the chances are we'll abuse it. And it doesn't matter whether it's a car loan, whether it's a personal loan. If we don't know the purpose of using that, then we are most likely going to abuse it. Yeah.
Because the assumption we make is that if we are buying a car, if we are buying a home, that those are good forms of debt. So therefore it's good to get into that debt. Yeah. It's not always the case, is it? Because the point I've made, I don't make money from using my car. I make money from broadcasting and I make money from hosting events. I don't need a super expensive car to get me to those places. So therefore, incurring debt to buy an expensive car will in effect be bad debt.
You're absolutely spot on. If you're a typical Thabo who drives from home to office and stays in office from 8 to 5, a big luxury German machine might not necessarily be a good idea, especially if you're buying that in debt. But if you are generating income, and income includes your salary, if you are driving to the office in a modest car that you can afford, and the key here, Africa, is live within your means, right? It's something that you can afford that helps you generate income, whether you use it for e-hailing. I'm not saying it's definitely that, but if you use it for income generation, that's typically your good debt. Even in your house, living in a modest house that within your means, right? Or you have debt that you use as leverage, then that's something different. But yeah, it's not obvious that buying a car or buying a house is necessarily a good debt. It might tend to be a bad debt if you're not managing it properly, if you're not managing it within your means, and if you're not using it for as leverage.
And yet, this economy needs to grow, and in order for it to grow, we need to spend. News this morning are that we spent 139 billion rand on Black Friday, which is 12.2 billion rand more than the previous year. Conley, my technical producer, is one of those people who spent on that day. Some people will not have the immediate resources to be able to make those purchases, particularly the big appliance purchases that they need. And it is on special, so therefore they will purchase it on debt. Is that good or bad debt?
Let's take a step back, right? I'm surprised that most people think Black Friday is not coming. There will be Black Friday in 2025, believe you me. Have you started planning for it? Have you put money aside? You know that you are that kind of guy. You are that Thabo that's going to spend money come Black Friday. The ideal thing is that putting money aside for those kind of purchases. Of course, there's instances where your fridge starts taking up all of a sudden. That's not something that you've planned, and there's nothing wrong with if I don't have enough cash. There's nothing wrong with using debt and within my means, buying that fridge. But then let's not act surprised. Let's not act like we don't know that we have kids that we have to take to school next year. We don't have Black Friday or we don't have birthdays. Those are the things that we need to plan for, right? Let's not create emergencies where emergencies don't exist, right? The whole idea is in a very prudent, if I can use that word, in a prudent way, right? Where it generates income for you. It forms part of your investment portfolio if you use debt leverage. But be careful in terms of debt. That can be your best friend or your worst enemy. So we know that better planning, living within your means, budgeting are the key to avoiding some of the debt traps. And we know that, yes, there will be people that will buy happy drinks using store cards. That's the worst idea that you can ever make, right? So ideally plan for it. Don't get surprised.
There are many products, a suite of products that are being made available by a variety of service providers where you can almost take out a short-term loan against your salary, right? So people are getting paid tomorrow, and as early as perhaps Monday this week, you could go out and take a loan against your salary. Obviously, it comes at extraordinary interest rates and other sorts of risks that come with it. Firstly, I don't know why that is illegal. That is legal in South Africa. Quite frankly, I don't know why we got to a point where we even permitted that, because all you are doing is getting yourself into a debt cycle that ultimately you'll never be able to get out of.
You are absolutely spot on. That's the first road to a very bad slippery slope. Once you get to a point where you borrow against your future, because you don't have that money as yet, right? But you already spending it. That's a bad idea. That's one of those products that I know my colleagues in the financial services will probably criticize me for this, but I think it's one of those products that should not be allowed. Let's rather teach and learn to live within our means so that we don't find ourselves in a space where we get into that spiral. You're absolutely correct. If you look at the numbers are telling us that we are and we use, unfortunately, those money for conspicuous expenditure, right? It's not something that is constructive, to be honest. So yes, if you can avoid it, by all means, please do avoid those payday loans, those loans that actually put you on a back foot, because there's nothing positive, honestly, that's going to come out of that. So I would advise against that.
Some people argue that having some debt is a good idea. You build a credit record so that when you do need to make the big purchases, a house, a loan for business, or whatever the case may be, you are in a position where financial service providers will be able to afford you that extension of credit. Is that true?
It is true. If you look at it, debt is about two things, right? Your ability to repay me if I give you money, and your willingness to repay me. And one of the ways to measure your willingness is if you have some sort of history. So if you start small with debt, but debt that you can afford, right? That kind of builds your score. That kind of builds your rapport in terms of how you use your credit, and that enables lenders to look at that history and say, hey, Africa is willing, when he is given money, to repay the money back, right? And within the means, which is the second bit. So absolutely, it is correct that it does build the rapport, it does build a history, and it enables the lenders to look at that history and lend you money in the future.
We'll leave it there, Thabo. Thank you very much for your time this morning. Thabo Hollo is a senior program manager at Old Mutual, drawing a distinction between good debt and bad debt for us, and why it is good to have good debt, and where possible, please stay away from bad debt.